switch to more. I haven't tested this ambiance music because I got distracted, but we're having a nice little rain thunderstorm fireplace ambiance. Hello, welcome in. I think the chat setup should be fine, especially when like YouTube starts going. But welcome in, everybody. We're doing an audio book live reading of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the 1818 text. I am reading the Penguin's Classic version from 2018. Since I haven't done a reading stream for a while, and for YouTube heads, not at all, what is going to happen is I'm going to be reading Frankenstein. If you want to grab a copy, either online or physical, feel free to do so. And we're just going to be reading through it. I will preface, asterisk, asterisk, not the person, the symbol. I'm not a professional reader. I'm not a professional out loud reader, so if I stumble over some words or pronounce something wrong, I do apologize. I'm going to do my best not to do that. But, you know, some things we can't prevent. I am going to... Oh god, there's like a big preamble here. I'm going to get to the first part of volume 1. And we're going to begin from there, from letter 1. So I'll give you guys a moment to grab your books, find the page with letter 1. It would be on page 7. There's a lot more than 7 pages behind it, so I think the page numbers are a lie. Page 7 of the Penguin's Classic version. I'm gonna have a drink, and then we're gonna pop off. I do apologize that the stream is kind of late. I got very distracted. I was talking with friends. And then I looked at the time and I was like, I'll bump it up to 7:30. And then it got to 7:40 and I was like, oopsie. I saw 2 people in the YouTube waiting room and I was like, I have to go. I have to go. There's people waiting on me. So, yeah. This will hopefully be a weekly stream on Wednesdays. Some light reading. Some light Wednesday reading. But without further ado... Letter 1 to Miss Seville, England, St. Petersburg, December 11th, 17. You will rejoice to hear that no disaster has accompanied the commencement of an enterprise which you have regarded with such evil forebodings. I have arrived here yesterday, and my first task is to assure my dear sister of my welfare and increasing confidence in the success of my undertaking. I am already far north of London, and as I walk upon the streets of Petersburg, I feel a cold northern breeze play upon my cheeks, which braces my nerves and fills me with delight. Do you understand this feeling? This breeze, which has travelled from the regions towards which I am advancing, gives me a foretaste of those icy climates. Inspirited by the wind of promise, my daydreams become more fervent and vivid. I try in vain to be persuaded that the pole is the seat of frost and desolation. It ever presents itself to my imagination, as the region is beauty and delight. There, Margaret, the sun is forever visible, its broad disk just skittering the horizon, and diffusing a perpetual splendor. There, for, with your leave, my sister, I will put some trust in preceding navigators. There snow and frost are banished, and, sailing over a calm sea, we may be wafted to a land surpassing in wonders and in beauty every region hitherto discovered on the habitable globe. Its productions and features may be without example, as phenomena of the heavenly bodies undoubtedly are in those undiscovered solitudes. What may not be expected in a country of eternal light? I may there discover the wondrous power which attracts the needle, and may regulate 1,000 celestial observations that require only this voyage to render the seeming intricities consistent forever. I shall satiate my ardent curiosity with the sight of a part of the world I've never visited, and may tread a land never before imprinted by the foot of man. These are my enticements, and they are sufficient to conquer all fear and danger or death, and to induce me to commence this laborious voyage with the joy a child feels when he embarks in a little boat with his holiday mates on an expedition of discovery up his native river. But, supposing all those conjectures be false, you cannot contest the inestimable benefit which I shall confer on all of mankind to the last generation, by discovering a passage into the pole of these countries, to reach which at present so many months are requisite, or by ascertaining the secret of the magnet, which, if at all possible, can only be effected by an undertaking such as mine. These reflections have dispelled the agitation with which I begin my letter, and I feel my heart glow with an enthusiasm which elevates me to heaven, for nothing contributes so much to tranquilize the mind as a steady purpose, a point on which the soul may fix its intellectual eye. This expedition has been the favorite dream of my early years. I have read, with ardor, the accounts of various voyages which have been made in the prospect of arriving at the North Pacific Ocean through the seas which surround the pole. You may remember that a history of all the voyages made for the purpose of discovery composed the whole of our good Uncle Thomas's library. My education was neglected, yet I was passionately fond of reading. These volumes were my study day and night, and with my familiarity with them increased the regret which I had felt as a child on learning that my father's dying injunction had forbidden my uncle to allow me to embark on a seafaring life. These visions faded when I perused for the first time those poets whose effusions entranced my soul and lifted it to heaven. I also became a poet, and for 1 year lived in a paradise of my own creation. I imagined that I might also obtain a niche in the temple where the names of Homer and Shakespeare are consecrated. You are well acquainted with my failure, and how heavily I bore the disappointment. But at the time, I inherited the fortune of my cousin, and my thoughts were turned into the channel of their earlier bent. 6 years have passed since I resolved on my present undertaking. I can, even now, remember the hour from which I dedicated myself to this great enterprise. I commenced by inuring my body to hardship. I accompanied the whalefishers on several expeditions to the North Sea. I voluntarily endured cold, famine, thirst, and want of sleep. I often worked harder than the common sailors during the day, and devoted my nights to study of mathematics, the theory of medicine, and those branches of physical science from which a naval adventurer might derive the greatest practical advantage. Twice I actually hired myself as an undermate in a Greenland whaler, and acquainted myself to admiration. I must own I feel a little proud when my captain offered me the second dignity in the vessel, and entreated me to remain with the greatest earnestness. So valuable did he consider my services. And now, dear Margaret, do I not deserve to accomplish some great purpose? My life might have been passed in ease and luxury, but I preferred glory to every enticement that wealth placed on my path. Oh, that some encouraging voice would answer in affirmative. My courage and my resolution is firm, but my hopes fluctuate, and my spirits are often depressed. I am about to proceed on a long and difficult voyage, the emergencies of which will demand all my fortitude. I am required not only to raise the spirits of others, but sometimes to sustain my own when theirs are failing. This is the most favorable period for traveling in Russia. They fly quickly over snow in their sledges. The motion is pleasant and, in my opinion, far more agreeable than that of an English stagecoach. The cold is not excessive, if you are wrapped in furs, a dress which I have already adopted, for there is a great difference between walking the deck and remaining seated motionless for hours, when no exercise prevents the blood from actually freezing in your veins. I have no ambition to lose my life on the post road between St. Petersburg and Archangel. I shall depart for the latter town in a fortnight, or 3 weeks, and my intention is to hire a ship there, which can easily be done by paying the insurance for the owner, and to engage as many sailors as I think necessary among those who are accustomed to whale fishing. I do not intend to sail until the month of June. And when shall I return? My dear sister, how can I answer the question? If I succeed, many, many months, perhaps years will pass before you and I meet. If I fail, you will see me again soon. Or never. Farewell, my dear, excellent Margaret. Heaven showered blessings down on you, and save me, that I may again and again testify my gratitude for all your loving kindness. Your affectionate brother, R. Walton. Alright, that was the end of letter number 1. Take a little sip and a drink. Welcome in anyone who's just come in. Thank you for liking that first chapter. That was just kind of the setup for the voice of this book. While it is the story of Victor Frankenstein and his monster, the story is told through R. Walton. It's like a story within a story. Just neat. But yeah, if no one's got anything to say, any points to make, we're gonna skip on over to letter 2. I might turn on this one. I might change the music really quick. Because I think there's one that had like a slight piano in the background, but I cannot find it again. I think this is the exact same one that I've opened. That's okay. We'll get over it. I thought I had one that had slight music in the background. But this is fitting, I think, considering thunder, lightning, and Frankenstein go pretty much together. Alright, I'm taking one more drink, and then we're gonna get into letter 2. Welcome, Cherry. Happy Wednesday. You're just in time for letter 2. To Miss Seville, England, Archangel, 28th of March, 17. How slowly time passes here, encompassed as I am by frost and snow, yet a second step is taken towards my enterprise. I have hired a vessel, and am occupied in collecting my sailors. Those whom I have already engaged appear to be men on whom I can depend, and are certainly possessed of dauntless courage. But I have one want which I have never yet been able to satisfy, and the absence of the object of which I now feel as a most severe evil. I have no friend, Margaret. When I am glowing with the enthusiasm of success, there will be none to participate in my joy. If I am assailed by disappointment, no one will endeavor to sustain me in dejection. I shall commit my thoughts to paper, it is true, but that is a poor medium for the communication of feeling. I desire the company of a man who could sympathize with me, whose eyes would reply to mine. You may deem me romantic, my dear sister, but I bitterly feel the want of a friend. I have no one near me, gentle yet courageous, possessed of a cultivated as well as a capacious mind, whose tastes are like my own, to approve or amend my plans. How would such a friend repair the faults of your poor brother? I am too ardent in execution, and too impatient at difficulties, but it is a still greater evil to me that I am self-educated. For the first 14 years of my life I ran wild on a common, and read nothing but our Uncle Thomas's Book of Voyages. At that age I became acquainted with the celebrated poets of our own country, but it is only when it had ceased to be in my power to derive its most important benefits from such conviction that I perceived the necessity of becoming acquainted with more languages than that of my native country. Now I am 28, and I am in reality more illiterate than many schoolboys of 15. It is true that I have thought more, and that my daydreams are more extended and magnificent, but they want, as the painters call it, keeping. And I greatly need a friend who would have sense enough not to despise me as a romantic, and affection enough for me to endeavor to regulate my mind. Well, those are useless complaints. I shall certainly find no friend on the wide ocean, nor even here in Archangel, among merchants and seamen. Yet some feelings, unallied to the doss of human nature, beat even in those rugged bosoms. My lieutenant, for instance, is a man of wondrous courage and enterprise. He is madly desirous of glory. He is an Englishman, and in the midst of national and professional prejudices, unsoftened by cultivation, retains some of the noblest endowments of humanity. I first became acquainted with him on board a whale vessel. Finding that he was unemployed in the city, I easily engaged him to assist on my enterprise. The master is a person of an excellent disposition, and is remarkable in the ship for his gentleness, and the mildness of his discipline. He is, indeed, of so amiable a nature that he will not hunt, a favourite, and almost the only amusement here, because he cannot endure to spill blood. He is, moreover, heroically generous. Some years ago he loved a young Russian lady of moderate fortune, and having amassed a considerable sum in prize money, the father of the girl consented to the match. He saw his mistress once before the destined ceremony, but she was bathed in tears, and throwing herself at his feet, entreated him to spare her, confessing at the same time that she loved another, but that he was poor, and that her father would never consent to the union. My generous friend reassured the suppliant, and, on being informed of the name of her lover, instantly abandoned his pursuit. He had already bought a farm of his money, on which he designed to pass to the remainder of his life, but he bestowed the whole on his rival, together with the remains of his prize money to purchase stock, and then himself solicited the young woman's father to consent to her marriage with her lover. But the old man decidedly refused, thinking himself bound in honor to my friend, who, when he found the father inexorable, quitted his country, nor returned until he heard that his former mistress was married according to her inclinations. What a noble fellow, you will exclaim. He is so, but then he passed all his life on board a vessel, and has scarcely an idea beyond the rope and the shroud. But do not suppose that, because I complain a little, or because I can conceive of a consolation for my toils, which I may never know, that I am wavering in my resolutions. Those are as fixed as fate, and my voyage is now delayed until the weather shall permit my embarkation. The winter has been dreadfully severe, but the spring promises well, and is considerably a remarkably early season, so that, perhaps, I may sail sooner than I expected. I shall do nothing rashly. You know me sufficiently to confide in my prudence and considerateness whenever the safety of others is committed in my care. I cannot describe to you the sensations on the near prospect of my undertaking. It is impossible to communicate to you a conception of the trembling sensation, half pleasurable and half fearful, with which I am preparing to depart. I am going to unexplored regions, to the land of mist and snow. But I shall kill no albatross, therefore do not be alarmed for my safety. Shall I meet you again, having traversed immense seas, and returned by the most southern cape of Africa or America? I dare not expect such success, but I cannot bear to look on the reverse of the picture. Continue to write to me every opportunity. I may receive your letters, though the chance is very doubtful, on some occasions when I need them most to support my spirits. I love you very tenderly. Remember me with affection, should you never hear from me again. Your affectionate brother, Robert Walton. That is the end of letter number 2. Letter number 3 is very short. But yeah, Robert, our boy Robert, he is very lonely and looking for a friend. I wonder if he'll find one. Maybe he'll have to make one, like Victor Frankenstein did. There is a part of this that I really enjoyed from letter number 2. I shall kill no albatross. That is a reference to a Greek epic. I'm not, just like our boy Robert, I'm not very well educated. But unlike him, I didn't self-educate that much. But I love the tale of the albatross, where they kill an albatross and he has to wear it around his neck. And that's not why we're here. I'm gonna quickly read letter 3. Take a break for a drink instead of a big chat, and then get on to letter 4. Blah. I'm getting tongue-tied already. Letter 3. To Miss Seville, England, July 7th, 17. My dear sister, I write a few lines in haste to say that I am safe and well advanced on my voyage. This letter will reach England by a merchantman now on its homeward voyage from the Archangel, more fortunate than I, who may not see my native land, perhaps for many years. I am, however, in good spirits, my men are bold and apparently firm of purpose, nor do the floating sheets of ice that continually pass us, indicating the dangers of the region towards which we are advancing, appear to dismay them. We have already reached a very high latitude. But it is the height of summer, and although not so warm in England as the southern gales, which blow us speedily towards the shores, which I so ardently desire to attain, breathe a degree of renovating warmth which I have not expected. No incidents hitherto befall us that would make a figure in a letter. One or two stiff gales and the breaking of a mast are accidents which experienced navigators scarcely remember to record, and I shall be well content if nothing worse happens to us during our voyage. Adieu, my dear Margaret. Be assured that for my own sake, as well as yours, I will not rashly encounter danger. I will be cool, preserving, and prudent. Remember me to all my English friends. Most affectionately yours, R.W. There's something about Robert. Robert loves a run-on sentence. My boy Robert loves a run-on sentence here. There are some parts where I'm like, I don't know where I breathe in here. There is not a single comma in sight. But we're getting on to letter number 4. I'm going to take one more drink. If you rename yourself Albert Ross, it's illegal for sailors to kill you. Oh my gosh. Wait. Also, hello, Lou. And that kid, welcome in. Robert does not know sentences can end. Sorry, the Albert Ross joke was really good. Okay. We're getting on to letter number 4. Also, I'm gonna... Oh god, I keep getting distracted. Letter 4 will happen eventually. I need to move YouTube up here. You don't see many popular novels written through letters and articles like this anymore. Yeah, I think it's just because with the rise of technology, not that many people are writing letters these days. Letter writing, kind of a dying art form. It's all over text, maybe emails. I'm sure I feel like emails though, like letters, I read that and I'm like, oh, this is sophisticated. This is old-timey, this is sophisticated. This is just like Bram Stoker's Dracula, my favorite book. But emails, there's something about a book written through like emails where I'm like, this is for tweens. This is a tween written book. Which is silly because I'm like, I feel like you could do like a little murder mystery over emails, and people do. Like there's the games where you have to go through people's social media and interact over emails to like solve a big mystery. I just don't think they hit the same as a letter. Especially because I'm like, letter, they usually have to be long with all the information in because, you know, you gotta wait to send them out. And it's also when people are sending letters, I'm like, oh god, because they're not going to be instantly received. So what you're reading in the letter, I'm like, by the time the person it's for gets it, the stuff's already passed. I do enjoy that. Because sometimes they'll be like saying really like urgent info, but then the postman won't get them their letter right away. And then it creates this drama. One of your favorite streamers, Cherry, does letter writing streams. He has dozens of fountain pens and so much stationery. Oh my gosh. That sounds really cool, actually. I like watching videos of people with nice handwriting because my handwriting is dog water. We need an epistolary novel written in tweets. Oh god, imagine. Yeah, the DNA of the style lives through the stuff like famous creepypastas, SCPs, and even ARGs. Oh, I love ARGs. I'm getting very distracted from my book, so I'm gonna say my favorite ARG, and I won't go into details about it. It's the one, it's like the meat farm one that's told for a couple of different channels, but the main channel is like it's a guy doing SpongeBob theories. It's a guy doing SpongeBob theories, but the SpongeBob theory videos, which are admittedly good, but they're just a cover-up for the ARG, and it's very cool, very fun. Okay. Letter number 4. To Miss Seville, England, August 5th, 17. So strange an accident has happened to us that I cannot forbear recording it, although it is very probable that you will see me before these papers can come into your possession. Last Monday, July 31st, we were nearly surrounded by ice, which closed in the ship on all sides, scarcely leaving her the sea room of which she floated. Our situation was somewhat dangerous, especially as we were compassed around by a very thick fog. We accordingly lay to, hoping that some change would take place in the atmosphere and weather. About 2 o'clock the mist cleared away, and we beheld, stretched out in every direction, vast and irregular plains of ice, which seemed to have no end. Some of my comrades groaned, and my own mind began to grow watchful with anxious thoughts, when a strange sight suddenly attracted our attention and diverted our solicitude from our own situation. We perceived a low carriage, fixed on a sledge and drawn by dogs, pass on towards the north, and the distance of a half-mile. A being which had the shape of a man, but apparently of gigantic stature, sat in the sledge, guided by the dogs. We watched the rapid progress of the traveller with our telescopes until he was lost among the distant inequalities of the ice. This appearance excited our unqualified wonder. We were, as we believed, many hundred miles from any land, but this apparition seemed to detonate that it was not, in reality, so distant as we supposed. Shut in, however, by ice, it was impossible to follow his track, which we had observed with the greatest attention. About 2 hours after this occurrence, we heard the ground sea, and before the night the ice broke, and freed our ship. We, however, lay until the morning, fearing to encounter the dark at those loose masses which float about after the breaking up of ice. I profited of this time to rest for a few hours. In the morning, however, as soon as it was light, I went upon the deck and found all the sailors busy on one side of the vessel, apparently talking to someone in the sea. It was, in fact, a sledge, like the one we had seen before, which had drifted towards us in the night, on a large fragment of ice. Only one dog remained alive, but there was a human being within it, whom the sailors were persuading to enter the vessel. He was not, as the other travellers seemed to be, a savage inhabitant of some undiscovered land, but a European. When I appeared on deck, the master said, "Here is our captain. He will not allow you to perish in the open sea." On perceiving me, the stranger addressed me in English, although with a foreign accent. "Before I come on board your vessel..." I know where Victor Frankenstein's from. I can't do the accent. He's just gonna be a little bit Scottish, and we're gonna have to get through that together. "Will you have the kindness to inform me of whither you are bound?" You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question. Actually, no, I'll do a nerd voice for him. I've changed my mind. You may conceive my astonishment on hearing such a question addressed to me from a man on the brink of destruction, and to whom I should have supposed that my vessel would have been a resource which he would not have exchanged for the most precious wealth the earth can afford. I replied, however, that we were on a voyage of discovery to the Northern Pole. Upon hearing this, he appeared satisfied, and consented to come aboard. Good God! Margaret! If you had seen the man who thus capitulated for his safety, your surprise would have been boundless. His limbs were nearly frozen, and his body dreadfully emancipated from fatigue and suffering. I never saw a man so wretched a condition. We attempted to carry him into the cabin, but as soon as he had quitted the fresh air, he fainted. We accordingly brought him back to deck, and resorted him to an animation by rubbing him with brandy, and forcing him to swallow a small quantity. As soon as he showed signs of life, we wrapped him up in blankets and placed him near the chimney of the kitchen stove. By slow degrees he recovered, and ate a little soup, which restored him wonderfully. 2 days passed in this manner before he was able to speak, and I often feared that his sufferings had depraved him of understanding. When he had in some measure recovered, I removed him to my own cabin, and attended on him as much as my duty would permit. I never saw a more interesting creature. His eyes have generally an expression of wildness, and even madness, but there are moments when, if anyone performs an act of kindness towards him, or does any of the most trifling service, his whole countenance is lighted up, as if it were a beam of benevolence and sweetness that I never saw equalled. But he is generally melancholy and despairing, and sometimes he gnashes his teeth, as if impatient of the weight and the woes that oppress him. When my guest was a little recovered, I had great trouble to keep off the men who wished to ask him 1,000 questions, but I would not allow him to be tormented by their idle curiosity, in a state of body and mind whose restoration evidently depended upon entire repose. Once, however, the lieutenant asked, why had he come so far upon the ice in such a strange vehicle? His countenance instantly assumed an aspect of the deepest gloom, and he replied, to seek the one who fled me. No. Sorry. No, I'm keeping it. And did the men who you pursued travel in the same fashion? Yes. Then I fancy we have seen him, for the day before we picked you up, we saw some dogs drawing a sledge, with a man in it across the ice. This aroused the stranger's attention, and he asked a multitude of questions concerning the route, which the Damon, as he called him, pursued. Soon after, when he was alone with me, he said, I have doubtless excited your curiosity, as well as those good people, but you are too considerate to make inquiries. Certainly. It would indeed be very impertinent and inhuman of me to trouble you with any inquisitiveness of mine. And yet you rescued me from a strange and perilous situation. You have benevolently restored me to life. Soon after he inquired if I thought that the breaking up of the ice had destroyed the sledge. I replied that I could not answer with any degree of certainty, for the ice had not broken until midnight, and the traveller might have arrived at the place of safety before that time, but of this I could not judge. From the time the stranger seemed very eager to be upon deck to watch the sledge which had before appeared, but I persuaded him to remain in the cabin, for he is far too weak to sustain the rawness of the atmosphere. But I have promised that someone would watch over him and give him instant notice if any new object should appear in sight. Such is my journal, of which relates to this strange occurrence, up to its present day. The stranger is gradually improved in health, but is very silent, and appears uneasy when any one except myself enters his cabin. Yet his manners are so conciliating and gentle that the sailors are all interested in him, although they have had very little communication with him. For my own part, I begin to love him as a brother, and his constant and deep grief fills me with sympathy and compassion. He must have been a noble creature in his better days, being, even now in wreck, so attractive and amiable. I said in one of my many letters, dear Margaret, that I should have found no friend on this wide ocean. Yet I have found a man who, before his spirit had been broken by misery, I should have been happy to have possessed as the brother of my heart. I shall continue this journal concerning the stranger at intervals, should I have any fresh incidents to record. This is still mid-letter, but we're going to just take a quick stop break so I can read here. The old brandy rum, yeah. A summary. Holy crap. He's not a savage and has manners, blushes. It is very gay coded. There's a lot of points in this where I'm sorry people who are like coming from an intellectual reading of Frankenstein. I think Mary Shelley might have been a Fujoshi. Is that controversial for me to say? I think she might have been a Fujoshi, because it's just some of the text, you know, lots of like, he's in my heart, he was beautiful. Spoiler alert, beautiful is also the word someone describes Frankenstein with. I'm gonna have to wait for the hiccups to go. Ah! Hello, Rain. Welcome in. I'm doing good. We're just in a little mid-letter break. We're gonna continue letter 4, the August 13th section of it. Any minute now. I'm just doing a little quick chat check to make sure I haven't missed anything. Little drinky drink. I should have really prepared 2 glasses of water because I'm almost done my first one. But these streams aren't very long just because reading out loud for an hour is rough. Especially for someone who doesn't talk a lot. Mary Shelley of Fujoshi, forum thread closed after 368 pages of heated debate. Yeah. And hello, Hyper Games, welcome in, I'm doing good. You're just in time for some more book reading. We are mid-letter 4, just about to start the August 13th entry. I'll take another drink to give time for anyone hurriedly opening their books to find the page, and then we're gonna continue on. I'm sorry if I giggle partway through. The voice that I've given... I don't think I can take Victor Frankenstein seriously with the voice that I've given him. But I've committed to it, and I think we're just gonna have to stick with that. Alright. August 13th, 17. My affection for my guest increases every day. He excites once my admiration and my pity to an astonishing degree. How can I see so noble a creature destroyed by misery without feeling the most poignant grief? He is so gentle, yet so wise. His mind is so cultivated, and when he speaks, although his words are culled with the choicest art, yet they flow rapidity and unparalleled eloquence. He is now much recovered from his illness, and is continually on deck, apparently watching for the sledge that preceded his own. Yet, although unhappy, he is not so utterly occupied by his own misery, but that he interests himself deeply in the employment of others. He has asked me many questions concerning my design, and I have related my little history frankly to him. He appeared pleased with the confidence, and suggested several alterations in my plan, which I shall find exceedingly useful. There is no pedantry in his manner, but all he does appear to spring solely from interest. He instinctively takes in the welfare of those who surround him. He is often overcome by gloom, and then he sits by himself and tries to overcome all that is sullen or unsocial in his humor. These paroxysms pass from him like a cloud from before the sun, though his dejection never leaves him. I have endeavored to win his confidence, and I trust I have succeeded. One day I mentioned to him the desire I have always felt of finding a friend who might sympathize with me and direct me by his counsel. I said, I did not belong to the class of men who were offended by advice. I am self-educated, and perhaps I hardly rely sufficiently upon my own powers. I wish, therefore, that my companion should be wiser and more experienced than myself, to confirm and support me. Nor have I believed it's impossible to find a true friend. I agree with you, replied the stranger. And believing in friendships is not only desirable, but a possible acquisition. I once had a friend, the most noble of human creatures, and am entitled, therefore, to judge respecting friendship. You have hope in the world before you, and have no cause for despair. But I have lost everything, and cannot begin life anew. As he said this, his countenance became expressive of a calm, settled grief that touched me to my heart. But he was silent, and persistently retired to his cabin. Even broken in spirit as he is, no one can feel more deeply than he does the beauties of nature. The starry sky, the sea, the ever sight afforded by these wondrous regions, seems still to have the power of elevating his soul from the earth. Such a man has a double existence. He may suffer misery and be overwhelmed by disappointments, yet when he is retired into himself, he will be like a celestial spirit that has a halo around him, within whose circle no grief or folly ventures. Will you laugh at the enthusiasm I express concerning this divine wanderer? If you do, you must have certainly lost that simplicity which was once your characteristic charm. Yet, if you smile at the warmth of my expressions, while I find every day new causes for repeating them. August 9th, 17. Yesterday the stranger said to me, You may easily perceive, Captain Walton, that I have suffered great and unparalleled misfortunes. I have determined once that the memory of these evils should die with me, but you have won me to alter my determination. You seek for knowledge and wisdom, as I once did, and I ardently hope that the gratification of your wishes may not be a serpent to sting you, as mine have been. I do not know the relation of my misfortunes will be useful to you, yet if you are inclined, listen to my tale. I believe that the strange incidents connected with it will afford a view of nature, which may enlarge your faculties and understanding. You will hear the power and occurrences, such as you have been accustomed to believe impossible, but I do not doubt, as my tale conveys in its series internal evidence of the truth of the events of which it is composed. You may easily conceive that I was much gratified by the offered communication, yet I could not endure that he should renew his grief by a recital of his misfortunes. I felt the greatest eagerness to hear the promised narrative, partially from curiosity, and partially from a strong desire to ameliorate his fate, if it were in my power. I expressed these feelings in my answer. "I thank you," he replied, "for your sympathy, but it's useless. My fate is nearly fulfilled. I will wait but for one event, and then I shall repose in peace. I understand your feeling," continued he, perceiving that I wished to interrupt him. "But you are mistaken, friend. If thus you will allow me to name you, nothing can alter my destiny. Listen to my history, and you will perceive how irrevocably it is determined." He then told me that he would commence his narrative the next day when I should be at his leisure. The promise drew from me the warmest thanks. I resolved every night, when I am not engaged, to record as nearly as possible in his own words what he has related during the day. If I should be engaged, I will at least make notes. The manuscript will doubtless afford you the greatest pleasure, but to me, who know him, and who hears it from his own lips, with what interest and sympathy shall I read it in some future day? And that is the end of the letter portion. I think, let me just see how long chapter 1 is. Ooh, this is a long boy. I think we can get through chapter 1 and then leave it there. I might need to take a mid-chapter break because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages. So I'll try and find a nice little place to do a mid-chapter break here, just because, ooh, it's a little, ooh, are all the chapters long? Oh God, okay, chapter 2 is not that long. I've been spoiled by Dracula. And, what's the other book I read? Charlotte's Web, by short chapters and things. Okay. Let's get just a little bit more in. I might be quiet for a second just to do some jaw stretches. Forgive me for silence. Do a little massage. All right. Are we ready for chapter 1? Ooh. This is now from Victor Frankenstein's perspective, but I will keep it in the same voice as Robert, since this is Robert writing out Victor Frankenstein's story. Make sense? It's also because I don't want to do that nerd voice constantly, because it will hurt. I am by birth a Genovese, and my family is one of the most distinguished of that republic. My ancestors had been for many years councillors in syndicates, and my father had filled several public situations with honor and reputation. He was respected by all who knew him for his integrity and indefatigable attention to public business. He passed his younger days perpetually occupied by the affairs of his country, and it was not until the decline of life that he thought of marrying, and bestowing on the state of sons who may carry his virtues and name down to posterity. As the circumstances of his marriage illustrate his character, I cannot refrain from relating them. One of his most intimate friends, who was a merchant from a flourishing state, fell, through numerous mischances, into poverty. The man, whose name was Buford, was a proud and unbending disposition, and could not bear to live in poverty and oblivion in the same country where he had formerly been distinguished for his rank and magnificence. Having paid his debts, therefore, in the most honourable manner, he retreated with his daughter to the town of Lucerne, where he had lived unknown and in wretchedness. My father loved Buford with the truest friendship, and was deeply grieved by his retreat in these unfortunate circumstances. He grieved also for the loss of society, and resolved to seek him out and endeavour to persuade him to begin the world again through his credit and assistance. Buford had taken effectual measures to conceal himself, and it was 10 months before my father discovered his abode. Overjoyed at this discovery, he hastened to the house, which was situated in a mean street near the Rus. But when he entered, misery and despair alone welcomed him. Buford had saved but a very small sum of money from the wreck of his fortunes, but it was sufficient to provide him with sustenance for some months, and in the meantime he hoped to procure some respectable employment in a merchant's house. The interval was consequently spent in inaction. His grief only became more deep and rankling, and when he had leisure for reflection, and at length it took so fast a hold of his mind that at the end of 3 months he lay on a bed of sickness, incapable of any exertion. His daughter attended him with the greatest tenderness, but she saw, with despair, that their little fund was rapidly decreasing, and there was no other prospect of support. But Caroline Buford possessed a mind of an uncommon mould, and her courage rose to support her in adversity. She procured plain work, she plaited straw, and by various means contrived to earn a pittance scarcely sufficient to support life. Several months passed in this manner. Her father grew worse. Her time was more entirely occupied in attending him. Her means of subsistence decreased, and in the 10th month her father died in her arms, leaving her an orphan and a beggar. The last blow overcame her, and she knelt by Buford's coffin, weeping bitterly, when my father entered the chamber. He came like a protecting spirit to the poor girl, who committed herself to his care, and after the interment of his friend, he conducted her to Geneva, and placed her under the protection of a relation. 2 years after this event, Caroline became his wife. When my father became a husband and a parent, he found his time so occupied by the duties of his new situation that he relinquished many of his public employments and devoted himself to the education of his children. Of these, I was the eldest, and destined successor to all his labours and utility. No creature could have a more tender parents than mine. My improvement and health were their constant care, especially as I remained for several years their only child. But before I could continue my narrative, I must record an incident which took place when I was 4 years of age. My father had a sister, whom he tenderly loved, and had married early in life an Italian gentleman. Soon after her marriage, she had accompanied her husband into her native country, and for some years my father had very little communication with her. About the time I mentioned she died, and a few months afterwards he received a letter from her husband, acquainting him with the intention of marrying an Italian lady, and requesting my father to take charge of the infant Elizabeth, the only child of his deceased sister. "It is my wish," he said, "that you should consider her your own daughter, and educate her as thus. Her mother's fortune is secured to her, and the documents of which I will commit to your keeping. Reflect upon this proposition, and decide whether you would prefer educating your niece yourself to her being brought up by a stepmother." My father did not hesitate, and immediately went to Italy, that he might accompany the little Elizabeth to her future home. I have often heard my mother say that she was at that time the most beautiful child she'd ever seen, and showed signs even then of a gentle and affectionate disposition. These indications, and a desire to bind as closely as possible the ties of domestic love, determined my mother to consider Elizabeth as my future wife, a design which she never found reason to repent. From the time Elizabeth Lavenza became my playfellow, and, as we grew older, my friend, she was docile and good-tempered, yet gay and playful as a summer insect. Although she was lively and animated, her feelings were strong and deep, and her disposition uncommonly affectionate. No one could better enjoy liberty, yet no one could submit with more grace than she did to constraint and caprice. Her imagination was luxuriant, yet her capability of application was great. Her person was the image of her mind. Her hazel eyes, although as lively as a bird's, possessed an attractive softness. Her figure was light and airy, and, though capable of enduring great fatigue, she appeared the most fragile creature in the world. While I admired her understanding and fancy, I loved to tend on her, as I should on a favourite animal, and I never saw so much grace both of the person and mind united to so little pretension. I'll quickly drink. Everyone adored Elizabeth. If the servants had any request to make, it was always through her intercession. We were strangers to any species of disunion and dispute, for although there was a great dissimilitude in our characters, there was harmony in that very dissimilitude. I was more calm and philosophical than my companion, yet my temper was not so yielding. My application was of longer endurance, but it was not so severe while it endured. I delighted in investigating the facts relative to the actual world. She busied herself in following the aerial creations of the poets. The world was to me a secret, which I desired to discover. To her, it was a vacancy, which she sought to people with imaginations of her own. My brothers were considerably younger than myself, but I had a friend in one of my schoolfellows who was compensated for this deficiency. Henry Clerval, the son of a merchant of Geneva, an intimate friend of my father. He was a boy of singular talent and fancy. I remember, when he was 9 years old, he wrote a fairy tale, which was the delight and amazement of all his companions. His favourite study consisted in books of chivalry and romance, and when very young, I can remember that we used to act plays composed by him out of these favourite books, and principal characters of which were Orlando, Robin Hood, Amadis, and St. George. No youth could have passed more happily than mine. My parents were indulgent, and my companions amiable. Our studies were never forced, and by some means we always had an end placed in view, which excited us to ardour and the prosecution of them. It was by this method, and not by emulation, that we were urged to application. Elizabeth was not incited to apply herself to drawing, that her companions might outstrip her, but through desire of pleasing her aunt, by the representation of some favourite scene done by her own hand. We learned Latin and English, and we might read the writings in those languages, and so far from study being made odious to us through punishment, we loved application, and our amusement would have been the labours of other children. Perhaps we did not read so many books, or learn languages so quickly, as those who are disciplined according to ordinary methods, but what we learned was impressed the more deeply on our memories. In this depiction of our domestic circle, I include Henry Clerval, for he was constantly with us. He went to school with me, and generally passed the afternoon at our house, for being an only child, the destitute of companions at home. His father was well pleased that he should find associates at our house, and we were never completely happy when Clerval was absent. I feel pleasure in dwelling in the recollections of childhood, before misfortune had tainted my mind, and changed its bright visions of extensive usefulness into gloomy, narrow reflections upon itself. But, in drawing the pictures of my early days, I must not omit to record those events which led, by insensible steps, to my after-tale of misery. For when I would account to myself for the birth of that passion, which afterward ruled my destiny, I find it arise, like a mountain river from ignoble and almost forgotten sources, but, swelling as it proceeded, it became the torrent which, in its course, had swept away all my hopes and joys. Natural philosophy is the genius which regulated my fate. I desire, therefore, in this narration, to state those facts which led to my predilection for that science. When I was 13 years of age, we all went on a party of pleasure to the baths near Fontaine. The inclemency of the weather obliged us to remain a day confined to the inn. In this house I chanced to find a volume of the works of Cornelius Agrippa. I opened it with apathy. The theory which he attempts to demonstrate, and the wondrous facts which he relates, soon changed this feeling into enthusiasm. Hello, Robin. Frankenstein. A new light seemed to dawn upon my mind, and bounding with joy, I communicated my discovery to my father. I cannot help remarking here that many opportunities instructors possess of directing the attention of their pupils to useful knowledge, which they utterly neglect. My father looked carelessly at the title page of my book and said, "Ah, Cornelius Agrippa, my dear Victor, do not waste your time upon this. It is sad trash." If, instead of this remark, my father had taken pains to explain to me the principles of Agrippa had been entirely exploded, and that the modern system of science had been introduced which possessed a much greater power than the ancient, because the power of the latter were chimerical, while those of the former were real and practical, under such circumstances, I would have certainly thrown Agrippa aside. With my imagination warmed as it was, should probably have applied myself to a more rational theory of chemistry, which resulted from modern discoveries. It is even possible that the train of my ideas would have never received the fatal impulse which led to my ruin. But the cursory glance my father had taken of my volume by no means assured me that he was acquainted with its contents, and I continued to read with the greatest avidity. Quickly drink. But thank you, Robin, for the resub. So hello, Hazel. We are mid-chapter 1 of the Penguin Classics. It is page 28. That might be hard for you to find if you're hopping in at this point. Okay. When I returned home, my first care was to procure the whole works of this author, and afterwards of Paracelsus and Albertus Magnus. I read and studied the wild fancies of these writers with delight. They appeared to me treasures known to few besides myself, and although I wished to communicate these secret stores of knowledge to my father, yet his indefinite censure of my favourite Agrippa always withheld me, I disclosed my discoveries to Elizabeth, therefore under a promise of strict secrecy. But she did not interest herself in the subject, and I was left by her to pursue my studies alone. It may appear very strange that a disciple of Albertus Magnus should arise in the 18th century, but our family was not scientifical, and I had not attended any of the lectures given at the schools of Geneva. My dreams were therefore undisturbed by reality, and I entered with the greatest diligence into the search of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. But the latter obtained my most undivided attention. Wealth was an inferior object. What glory would attend the discovery? If I could banish disease from the human frame and render man invulnerable to any but a violent death. Nor were these my only visions. The raising of ghosts or devils was a promise liberally accorded by my favourite authors, the fulfilment of which I most eagerly sought. And, if my incantations were always unsuccessful, I attributed the failure rather to my own incompetence and mistake than to a want of skill or fidelity in my instructors. The natural phenomena that takes place every day before our eyes did not escape my examinations. Distillation, and the wondrous effects of steam, processes of which my favourite authors were utterly ignorant, excited my astonishment, but my utmost wonder was engaged by some experiments on an air pump, which I saw employed by a gentleman whom we were in the habit of visiting. The ignorance of the early philosophers on these and several other points served to decrease their credit with me, but I could not entirely throw them aside before some other system should occupy their place in my mind. When I was about 15 years old, we had retired to our house near Bellerive, where we witnessed a most violent and terrible thunderstorm. It advanced from behind the mountains of Jura, and the thunder burst at once with frightful loudness from various quarters of the heavens. I remained, while the storm lasted, watching its progress with curiosity and delight. As I stood on the door, on a sudden I beheld a stream of fire issue from an old and beautiful oak, which stood about 20 yards from our house. And so soon as the dazzling light vanished, the oak had disappeared, and nothing remained but a blasted stump. When we visited it the next morning, we found the tree shattered in a singular manner. It was not splintered by shock, but entirely reduced to thin ribbons of wood. I never beheld anything so utterly destroyed. The catastrophe of this tree excited my extreme astonishment, and I eagerly inquired of my father the nature of the origin of thunder and lightning. He replied, "Electricity," describing at the same time the various effects of that power. He constructed a small electrical machine and exhibited a few experiments. He also made a kite with a wire and string, which drew down that fluid from the clouds. The last stroke completed the overthrow of Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus, and Paracelsus, who had so long reigned the lords of my imagination. But, by some fatality, I did not feel inclined to commence the study of any modern system, and this disinclination was influenced by the following circumstance. My father expressed a wish that I should attend a course of lectures upon natural philosophy, to which I cheerfully consented. Some accident prevented me from attending these lectures until the course was nearly finished. The lecture, being therefore one of the last, was entirely incomprehensible to me. The professor discussed with great fluency the potassium and boron and sulfates and oxides, terms which I could affix no idea. And I became so disgusted with the science of natural philosophy, although I still read Pliny and Buffon with delight, authors, in my estimation, of nearly equal interest and utility. My occupations at this age were principally in the mathematics, and most of the branches of study appertaining to that science. I was busy employed in learning languages. Latin was already familiar to me, and I began to read some of the easiest Greek authors without the help of a lexicon. I also perfectly understood English and German. This is the list of my accomplishments at the age of 17, and you may conceive that my hours were fully employed in inquiring and maintaining a knowledge of this various literature. Another task was also devolved upon me. When I became the instructor of my brothers, Ernest was 6 years younger than myself, and was my principal pupil. He had been afflicted with ill health from his infancy, which Elizabeth and I had been his constant nurses. His disposition was gentle, but he was incapable of any severe application. William, the youngest of our family, was yet an infant, and the most beautiful little fellow in the world. He had lively blue eyes, dimpled cheeks, and endearing manners, inspired the tenderest affection. Such was our domestic circle, from which care and pain seemed forever banished. My father directed our studies, and my mother partook of our enjoyments. Neither of us possessed the slightest preeminence over the other. The voice of command was never heard amongst us, but mutual affection engaged us all to comply with and obey the slightest desire of the other. And that was the end of chapter 1. And as far as we're gonna go with this one. But yeah, oh, you love Frankenstein? Hell yeah. I love Frankenstein too. It's been a while since I've read it. I do love the foreshadowing with lightning. That is a really good part for me on that, with the how he's so enamored by the thunderstorm, and his dad teaches him with like the kite and the string to be able to like conduct lightning. I don't quite know the term for that, but yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed our reading of Dracula. Yeah, these are going to be just short streams with like an hour, because I start stumbling more over words the more locked up my like jaw gets from yapping and reading and doing little voices for it. But yeah, I do enjoy these streams a lot, because I don't have to put in a lot for them. I don't have to think of funny jokes, because it's just me reading. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I will say these are probably better watched on YouTube, just because with YouTube you can rewind if you come in late easier, which I mean you can do on Twitch. To me, this is for YouTube heads. This is for the VOD watchers. This is a watchable VOD that you just put on for an hour to watch me stumble over words and probably mispronounce things. But yeah, I'll try and do this every Wednesday. No promises on it, because you know, if I'm busy on a Wednesday I won't be able to, but we're gonna try for around like 7 to 7:30 p.m. MST, 6 to 6:30 p.m. PST on Wednesdays, to just get an hour of reading. This will probably be a long running a long running one just because we only finished chapter 1. We are, let me just get the page again. We're very not far into it. So we made it about 30 pages. There's about 240. So going off that, it is probably going to take us 9 or 10 streams. So 9 or 10 weeks to get through Dracula. But not Dracula, Frankenstein. Yeah. We are going to go read into Aqua, who is playing Final Fantasy VII with Multi. Speaking of Final Fantasy VII, did you guys know that we're playing Crisis Core on Sunday, also with Multi and also with Tisha? We're going to be playing Zack Fair game, Crisis Core Reunion, Sunday night around between 5 and 6 p.m. PST. Unsure right now of when people are free. But yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. And I'll see you on the flip side. It might be loud where we're raiding, so if you've just been chilling with this, like, volume boosted, sometimes Multi yells, so I'm just gonna preface with that. Alright, but I will see you... I'll probably see you Saturday morning. I think our next stream will be Devil May Cry 3. We're starting Devil May Cry 3 Saturday morning around 9:30 a.m. PST. So I'll catch you then, or I'll catch you next Wednesday. I'll catch you at some point. Well, I guess unless you never come back. Get out of my house. Bye!
Get out of here.
No, he's scared.
That's literally what you had to do.